Yes.
And what a great blossoming we're seeing right now in St. Petersburg and our region. Fantastic. And to know that you have been like working in this area for a long time. Really appreciate that.
And we just celebrated 25 years since we founded it. So wow.
Wow. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of seeds that you've been planting, my friend. And I congratulate you for your work and appreciate what you've been doing.
We'd love to talk about that some more. So
okay.
I know you have more that you want to share.
We've got more there going on. Rob's a busy guy and been doing a lot. So Rob's also the founder and CEO, I suppose, of the Global Action Coalition. And people can tune into that, the globalactioncoalition.org. And in that, through the Global Action Coalition, Rob has been doing a lot of work with school children in the mountains of Nepal, earthquake relief, of course, currently, and is now embarking on some efforts in Africa, similar efforts in Africa, and Rob's going to talk more about that as we go along. And another aspect of Rob's work has been to build international coalitions for peace through military personnel, which is very intriguing to me. I remember the first time hearing you tell me about that about yourself, Rob. I was really wondering, how in the heck do you do that?
Well, you're not the first. Remember, I think I shared with you that I was on Deepak Chopra's Sirius Radio. Because I mentioned that to him after he had done a speech and talked locally. And he was so fascinated by that he said, I want to have you on my show. And so if you want to fly to New York or do you want to do it on the phone, which I chose to do.
So tell us a little bit about this coalition, this loose coalition of military people, and how you, a guy who spent 5 years in a community, a commune, if you will, in Tennessee, a guy who admittedly protested against the Vietnam War, right? How are you building this coalitions with military people, and how do you establish credibility with them? What is it? How does that work?
Well, first when Vietnam was happening, I had the good fortune to have some friends at Hofstra University, where I was there for a year, who were Vietnam veterans who had come back, and they were Vietnam veterans against the war, VVAW, and they educated me. The veterans and the Vietnam soldiers weren't the problem. Of course, they get put in situations where things can happen, and it's very tough. I wouldn't want to go through that. I'm glad I didn't go through that. In fact, I found out my mother wasn't going to let me go through that with a high draft number. So, not that I wouldn't have served. I had been in my pathway. I wanted to go to the Naval Academy. That was my dream, to be a naval historian, a military historian. So I'm interested in it.
Yes, you also do reenactments, don't you? Miniature reenactments.
And about the gallery.
Yeah,
battlefields to do talks.
Right.
So I'm fascinated by war, and I'm fascinated by also the odd moments that happen in the war where you find peace happening too, which is always a great story. When you have people, for just a little short thing, Fredericksburg, Mary Heights is at the top, and the Union soldiers were assaulting this position, and at one point, the soldiers were the Irish Brigade, men from Boston and New York, were attacking, and that Mary Heights was defended by Cobb's Legion. These were boys from Georgia who were Irish. So they were members of the same secret organization. They were family members to some degree.
Sure.
And here they were fighting each other.
Right.
Irish against Irish.
Right.
In a war that they thought would be one big battle, be over. The Irish would learn how to fight. They'd be trained, and then they would go liberate Ireland, from the British. So that was the thing. And then, I guess after 5 years or 4.5 years of fighting, they just were done with war. But it was like, so you have these moments in time where you have brother versus brother, and you have people reaching out and doing beautiful things for somebody.
So it's that commonality that people can see in each other's eyes that they can connect through in some way, and sometimes even in those worst of circumstances that can come through. And how heartbreaking it must be to be involved in that scenario and have to break that peace and then go back.
Well, you know, what we
fight.
can see is who we hate right at the moment.
Mm.
And in a case in point about Gettysburg, I had set up the battlefield at Gettysburg at my gallery, and I had probably around 50 people standing around this table that was 12 feet long and almost 6 feet wide. And I was telling a story about a young soldier who was part of the Mississippi Brigade, and they were marching down in this railroad cut. And along that, in that moment, they got surrounded and fired on by a Union brigade, the enemy, and many of them died, and the rest of them surrendered. And one man decided to hide because he didn't want to go off to be a prisoner, and he hid under a dead body. And when they took away the rest of them to captivity, he snuck out the back and into the forest. And who does he run into but a Union soldier who had his jaw almost shot off, who was suffering, the enemy. And you know, you would think after watching his men, his fellow soldiers being killed, that he would stick a bayonet in them. But no, he decided to tend to this person and set him up against a tree and gave him water and as much as he could do before leaving him. And you know, I didn't know the rest of the story. I just knew that part of the story. And I thought that was a great story.
Right.
I had a reenactor at that event who was dressed up in uniform of New Jersey. As he said, even though I'm from the South, there's a need for northern reenactors in the South because everybody wants to be a Southerner. And he says, wait a minute, let me tell you, that man was my great-great-great-granduncle. And he did survive the war. And he did get in touch with that person, and they remained friends. And you'll hear the same story. There's a...
So this is an example of how different philosophies can cross lines through human connection.
Right. It happens time and time again.
Yeah. So let's tie that into your work with military personnel.
Well, before I do that, this is one more great story, if you don't mind, just because it touches people. A B-17 bomber was flying back after a bombing raid over Germany, and it was severely wounded, and they flew over a Luftwaffe German installation, and they sent up a fighter pilot to shoot it down. And as he got up close to it, he could see the plane was very badly shot up, and there was blood leaking out. There was nobody in the guns. He come up alongside the pilot, and he was wounded, and he just nodded to him, and then he decided not to shoot him down, but to escort him back. And again, years later, these guys became friends. So again, it's back to the idea that the commonality of finding humanity in another person, realizing that could be me. That could be me. That's the connection that there are. And I think, you know, over the years, we see these people as our enemy, but years later, we're allies. You know, I've had friends who were Japanese and Germans, and who are my friends now, and they fought with my father, you know?
Right. And so you're working with these men and women who are involved in the business of war, if you will, and they're also interested in working with you in these activities to build peace and to build community and to act for the improvement of humanity. Warriors for peace, in a way, is the way you put it.
Yeah, a lot of them have seen the horrors of war. And they've been to Bosnia, they've been to these different Africa, they've been, you know, whether they're from Belgium or America, any number of countries. And a lot of them have been touched, and they feel that they don't want to see more of that. And they feel the last answer, my favorite comment is, violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. Harry Seldon from the Foundation trilogy, with Isaac Asimov.
Right, yes.
So, you know, violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. So I know that sometimes we don't have a choice, but more often than not that we do have choices. And so I had the real luck to get involved when Central Command started gearing up when we started the war with Afghanistan after 9/11. A lot of countries sent people here to MacDill Air Force Base. And my friend...
Central Command in Tampa.
Yes. And my friend Chip Deal, who had been the wing commander at MacDill, had been brought back by Tommy Franks, the head of Central Command, to be the head of this Coalition Coordination Center in the American Head. And since I had become friends with him and worked together to help the community near the base and to help do some things, he and I had become friends and had kind of credibility. He said, I want you to meet these people.
So you were doing work in the community.
Yeah, I was president of the South Tampa Chamber.
Okay, you were president of South Tampa Chamber.
Yeah.
And this is how this connection came about. So as Nuance Gallery owner, you joined the chamber, became the president, took an active role in the chamber, obviously, to become the president, and then met some military personnel through your friend, who was also a member, and who saw the work that you were doing.
When I got involved with the chamber was not very involved in community. They were very much involved with helping businesses with their own thing, and I always felt that was lacking was the community aspect. So that's what I kind of brought to it, and it really still is happening, which they're more involved with education, more involved with MacDill in the military, they're more involved with things like that. And I always feel like that's a little legacy I left behind of bringing it there. But yeah, it was really kind of fun. I mean, I got to meet the Japanese and the French, and they loved meeting Americans, and they make friends very quickly. Mm-hmm. That's one thing you'll find in the military.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess they're traveling all over the place, and they have to make friends in a lot of different places, and they're pretty skilled at it, I suppose. So tell me about some of the connections that you have. Well, what these connections, how you and the people that you're working with from MacDill and all over the world, how you take that energy, how you are taking that energy and turning it into this work for humanity and this work for peace.
Well, one of the things that I did, I've done quite a different things for different people in need. When I sat down with the Albanian captain of public affairs there, or whatever Pakistan naval officer whose daughter was very sick and is having insurance issues.
So these are people who are coming through MacDill, and you're having you're meeting them and going out to dinner.
I need help. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes everybody's working so hard there to fight the war against terrorism. Someone like me who's really not actively involved in the community, and I'm available to help them. So I've helped a few of them for different ways. But one of the things that I'm most proud of is I started a program where Thanksgiving we would invite people from the coalition to be with American families to experience America's greatest holiday in my mind. Sometimes the craziest holiday too, but that's another story. But I started with myself. We started inviting people into our home for Thanksgiving, and then that began a whole thing where I now do 25 to 30 families. They exchange, and that builds great connections. But one of the first ones I did, I had two people invited. One was a Kenyan Air Force colonel, who's now a 2-star Air Force general back in Kenya. And the other one is now a 2-star general in his country of Bangladesh. And Atul Hassan came there with his 2 sons dressed impeccably and his wife. And he said to me, Robert, I need some help. I said, what do you need? He says, my country was hit by a typhoon. And it was called SIDR, S-I-D-R. And he said, many people are homeless. Many people have died. He says, can you help? And I think what he was looking for was money. And so I thought, I could do better than that. So I said, I know somebody, and I'm back to the monk, Bhante Wamala. I contacted Bhante.
One of those threads.
Yes. I said, Bhante, the man who'd been staying in my house, who had doing meditations for many, many years, 15, 20 years. He was doing meditations, we'd come in, book signings, whatever we could do when he was around. I knew he had started getting involved in doing things to help the world. So I called him and said, Bhante, this has happened. What are you thinking? He was in Kenya. And he said, I will be in Bangladesh in 2 days. If you can arrange somebody to take me to these areas, let's see what we can do. And that began a project of building homes in Bangladesh, working with the Bangladesh military.
Wow.
Which is one of the only groups there that's really least corrupt or non-corrupt. And that was kind of exciting. So this monk and I were working together, and I was raising money and awareness. And when it was all done, or at least the work was done, the Bangladesh officer said, "Can next time he's around, bring him over to Central Command?" I said, "Yes." So we arranged, And I brought him over there, and we got to tour a little bit of the Coalition Village and meet people. And my friends from Nepal, who had just started getting me involved in playing tennis with them, said, when can you come and help us? We have a big issue of education. And he and I talked about it and talked about it. Then I kind of got the idea he wasn't going to do anything. So I went to a few of my friends involved with the chamber. And also I met a young man from Nepal and said, let's form this organization, let's do something. We'll do it ourselves. And the young man, just to do a little side, Hemu Adhikari, had been sending books over there. His story is amazing because he came here many years ago, and his son, who's part American, part Nepal, said to him one day, Dad, tell me about you were growing up. And he started sharing about how they had books in the school. The next thing you know, his son saying, well, what can we do about that? And so he started sending books over there and started a little organization called Books for Nepal.
So that was the heart tug.
Yes.
That started this all, was this comment from this child.
Exactly.
Who was growing up not knowing about his heritage and knowing a little bit about it and knowing about the suffering, some of the suffering that was going there, seeing that, and then asking his father, can we do something about this?
Right. And then when I met Hemu, I said, you have great contacts. I think we can do a lot.
So great contacts. Once again, this weaving of contacts and relationships, and taking that energy that each of us have individually and connecting into this synergy that with an idea, with some focus, can become something that is more than just an idea. It becomes a divine inspiration, right? Right. Let me just back up a little bit, Rob, because I'm really curious about this. Now, this might get a little bit personal, but where in you does this drive to be a part of community, to help people, to organize, to do something bigger, right? Your first thought was, okay, well, I can do something more than that, right? Where's that come from?
First thought was my mother and father.
Your mother and father.
Yeah, they were always involved.
Okay.
My father was.
They were active.
My father was a Mason. I was doing things with the Masons. My father became president of the golf club, but he tried to make them do things that were better.
Okay.
And then my mother was very involved with the Democratic Party and supporting people who, especially against the war. But she also, there was a beach that was going to be taken over by developers that was part of Atlantic Beach, which is near where we live. And she thought that was wrong, so she led the fight to save Atlantic Beach and did and succeeded. So she was that kind of person.
So she was involved in her community and her environment, and they both of your mother and your father were great role models for that. You saw that firsthand.
Mm-hmm. So I give them a lot of credit for that, and my mother for exposing me to the arts. And so they were part of that shaping.
How does that go together? How does the arts and being open, having heart opening, being available for that, how do you think those go together?
That's a good question. Well, definitely there's a point where when you're working in the arts, you're definitely not working, in my mind, in something that's like stock or insurance, which they wanted me to go in their insurance business, or something
secure,
cold. Because the arts generally tend to lead to, artists and their creation and their hearts. And there are people in the business that's all about, they can be selling toilet paper for all they're concerned.
Right. Okay. Just cranking it out.
There's famous artists like Thomas Kincaid, who, there's all sorts of stories about what he did and how his business dealings were, which were anything much less than what you thought he was. Or Peter Mack. There's different artists who just didn't seem like they understood what art should be to me. So I kind of got involved in that direction, into the arts, and in that same way, got involved with doing stuff in the community. It always was part of selling Nuance. That was more exciting, was to go do community stuff and get to know people. Of course, what happens when you get to know people working on a project to help something bigger than you, then people get to understand who you are and you get credibility. So, you know, working together, I always say this to people joining a chamber, the Southampton Chamber or any organization, that just don't be there looking for what's in it for you, but go out there and get involved. And then it'll come back to you.
So see what you can do.
Yeah,
not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country,
well, you know,
your community.
The JFK certainly had something there, and Bobby Kennedy with the ripples. That whole idea of the ripples of change. You know?
Right.
So that both the Kennedys had their inspiration that my generation and your generation was moved by.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So this is what has driven you is this opening of the heart, knowing that there was something other than business, but not being disconnected from business, because obviously you found a way to be involved in business and community and assisting people with expression and supporting artists and supporting that aspect of life. And you do it very, very well. One of the latest projects that you've been involved in is through the Nuance Galleries, which is representing Cuban artists, which you've been doing for a number of years now, since 2012 that I know of, when you first brought a number of artists over to the gallery. And I just was there with you last Friday, and that you're representing another Cuban artist, now up to 15 or so.
Right.
Yeah. And Oscar Lazaro, am I saying that? Laceria, sorry, Oscar, is there, and he's presenting his work there, and some really beautiful, amazing work from Cuba. And this is such a portentous time when we're talking about Cuba and opening the grand opening of the gates again between these two countries, that to know that you were there and bringing these artists over way before then as a part of this opening, it's really, really incredible. And I was there, you invited us to come as and to read some poetry. You invited my group to write poetry to that event. And I think that we'll use this moment to segue into our poetry pause. And what I'd like to do is read a poem that I wrote for Cuba.
Can I share something with you before we
Sure.
read it, because it gives some background?
Yeah.
So what I had asked the poets was, we were having a theme of Cuba, because the artwork was all Cuban, and you came into the gallery and wrote this poem and read this poem that was so moving to me. And I said to you, I got to have a copy of that because it really spoke to me. And then this time, with Oscar there, we talked about it, and I said, you got to come and read that poem. And you went a step further.
Right.
You found this very nice person to translate it.
Yes.
Which I don't remember her name right now, but you will probably do.
Rita Risco.
Rita Risco.
Rita Risco, fantastic story. We met on a Friday night, and on Sunday I was sitting after yoga at the Dali Museum, having coffee next to somebody I didn't know, and we just started chatting about the show. And so speaking of connections, right? So we're talking about the show, and she says, "Well, I'm Cuban." I said, "Well, you really have to have this information." So going through the phone, getting her email and sending her the information about Nuance Galleries and when the show is going to be. And I had an inspiration in that moment. I just met this person 10 minutes ago. And then you and I had talked about how beautiful it would be. And of course, we've had this thought for a long time, how beautiful it would be to have this poem read in both English and Spanish. And just like from my heart and a place of boldness that I don't usually go to, I turned to Rita and I said, "Rita, this is really pretty bold, but I have to ask you, would you be willing to take on a project to translate this poem for this show?" And she looked at me like, "Sure." She said, "Yeah, she's a great lady. She's a teacher. She has 2 daughters who are teachers. She's a docent at the Dali for many, many years. So as long as she's been here, since the first days. And she's a wonderful, wonderful, warm-hearted person. And, I guess I put her on the spot. She couldn't hardly say no, but she did say yes. And she didn't know if she could get it done. And she showed up on Friday night, and she brought it with her. We still had 4 lines that had to be translated, that somebody else who was there, Susanna Wymuth, who's now head of the Tampa Bay
Business Committee for Culture.
Right.
Here's a tie-in.
There's another tie-in, another
the new director who actually got me more involved again. Now I'm chair of the Past Presidents Committee, and I'm working with her on very many things. And she's wonderful, but she's Cuban.
Yes.
And so she said, I would love to read this, and I want to come. And so
right. And so Rita said, of course, please read it. And Susanna translated the last 4 lines, and then cold, she stood up next to me, and we read this poem together. It was a really, really beautiful moment.
So please read it.
And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to do it. So I'm going to read this just in English, and maybe someday we'll have a double reading of it. So this, the title of this is Brothers, Hermanos, for Cuba. Where did we go wrong? When did we stop speaking, brother? What was it that stopped our singing out loud? When siblings argue, they can rejoin in smiles only they can know from deep shared history. Our lands know one another, from the same great mother-father of the same sea. Ancient fraternal twins, so close we could almost see one another, separated by early forces of earth shaping. Still, we swim under the same waves made silver by the same moon. Our trees sway in the same breezes, withstand the same hurtling rains. We humble under the same blue streak lightning shrieking thunder. Our noses sniff the same richness rising from the tide pool, venting from hot-baked forest floor, lingering near bursting blossoms, savored and emanating from the same enthralled lovers. But when I think of you, brother, sadly I know next to nothing. A mysterious, opaque shroud covers your island body. Our divorced parents spat obscene descriptions at one another. We overheard and came to believe that we, as a part of them, were also obscene to one another. And we lost touch, became lost in the lies, laying in the dark, staring numbly past the curtains toward peeking stars, aching for reunion. Growing up now, we are leaving behind the closed and locked doors of our separate houses, awakening to a breaking dawn, singing, though still apart, with the songbirds trilling in the rising brightness. Now, through our intelligence and the knowing in our minds, we can reunite in reason. Now, through our art and the knowing in our bodies, we can reunite in beauty. Now, through our emotion and the knowing in our hearts, we can reunite in love. Now we will regain our separated parts and know as brothers, my brother. When we see stars flare above a loping sea, feel the warmth of sun sparkling in the azure sky specked with far flying wings, walk beneath spreading branches of great-rooted trees, gripping tightly the odd-shaped bones of earth and ancestor, we will know as brothers, my brother, that we share the same stole stuff, never to be rent again.
So beautiful.
Hermanos for Cuba.
You know, it's interesting. I was mentioning to you, I started a little project with John Wilson. Well, remember John Wilson, Fox TV,
yes,
Channel 13.
Yes,
good guys. You know, who's
around
many.
Yes.
And Mary and John and I got to meet each
other.
Kind
of a father figure for our area, right?
Right. Well, John, I invited again. Here's the circles. We're going to do a little talk about circles, I guess. The circles of how things kind of keep coming around. I had John speak a couple times at the South Tampa Chamber, and then he had heard about the Business Committee for the Arts, which now is Business Committee for Culture and the Arts, and he invited me when I was trying to get us started to be on a TV show that he had on Sunday mornings, we interviewed people from the community. And I remember talking very clearly about the aims and goals, as you said, about business helping the arts and arts helping business, and how essential that is. And we were going great guns, and then he turned and he said, "Man, you have an art gallery. How is it for you being in the arts?" And it was like, oh, I couldn't say. It was like my brain was on a different. I couldn't. It was,
that was your cue, right?
It was like cue. I had a chance to sell the gallery about the great things I was doing, and I couldn't even talk for a minute. It was like coffee. But it was the beginning of getting to know John, and then later on, Whalen, who was the music conductor for the Florida Orchestra, had been around for 10 years.
Sure, yeah.
And a friend of mine, who was the acting director of the Florida Orchestra, she was the principal harpist, decided to honor Whalen with a luncheon. And so John did a beautiful video tribute of Whalen. So he was again working with me on that whole thing. And then, so John always stayed in touch on some level. And always I would send things to him and we'd have little connections. And we were on Facebook talking about something, and he mentioned the idea of debates about the issue of Cuba and the opening of Cuba. Was it right? Was it wrong?
Right.
You know, he had his own experience, which was pretty negative, going there, and he talks about it. The police taking away their cameras and making them wonder if they were going to get out because they kind of snuck in was part of the issue. But and the truth about the Castros and there's nothing good really could say about the Castros. They've done a lot of harm to a lot of people, and I've heard it, especially during these debates that we organized.
Right.
We had on one side Patrick Montega from La Gaceta, who was really quite interested in saying we need to do some change here. It's not working. Let's try and open the doors, and by being there, we can influence and change Cuba. And the other side, E.J. Otero, who served at Central Command, intelligence officer, and kind of had hands-on a little bit, whose father was Radio Marti, which was the radio was set up to basically counter, Castro. Right. And also his father was the founder of Telemundo. So, there's a man from the Cuban community, especially Miami Cuban community, where there's so much anger
a lot of people were hurt, as you said, and that healing has not occurred yet either.
No, not
still has not, and that will be a bigger part of what will be happening as we go forward from this. What is a portentous moment with the opening of the embassies, and there is a lot of personal healing that still needs to go on, and that's going to be a very long process, I'm sure. Yeah.
And what I also find a little interesting is that in Congress, so many of the people who are going to make a vote on this have no real care. They care less.
Right.
All they care about is where the votes are, or maybe being against the president. Because he opened the door, so now we're going to try to close the door, make it look bad. So there's all that kind of thing, which gets in the way of what could happen. So, we have these debates.
Right.
We've had the first one was at the South Tampa Chamber for lunch.
And how long ago was this? When did this occur?
The first debate was last February.
Okay.
And then we did one at the University of Tampa. We had a nice big crowd for that. And then we did one recently at the Poynter Institute. Okay, with them. And each of them has drawn anywhere from 70 to 150 people. And each of them had people who were very strongly beliefs that they wanted to share about this. And some of it, you had to feel for them. And then you also realize, they had some truth. There's nothing good to be said about the Castros. And then here I am now bringing in artists from Cuba and saying to them, tell me about what your life is like. And I'm hearing another experience. Sure. Of course, the people I'm working with are not living in Havana. So as they say, what happens in Havana is different from what happens.
What geography are they from?
Okay, they're from the east. And one is from Camagüey, which is pretty far east. And then the other ones are from Baracoa and Santiago, which is the Oriente, the east.
The Oriente, that's the name of your show, really, the Oriente.
Well,
Oriente.
Yeah. So
the Oriente artists. And really, they're what they're bringing in terms of the reflection of the country there in their art There's a photorealist who's